Hello, everyone. Ryan Embree here with the Sweet Spot podcast, and we are fresh off of our 2025 hospitality show coverage in Denver, Colorado. We are back here in our travel media group headquarters, a little bit closer to sea level in our Sweet Spot podcast studio. Absolutely incredible event. Want to first thank QuestX and AHLA, as well as the city of Denver for hosting from end to end. So amazing, from the programming to the networking to the industry professionals that we had the privilege of interviewing. You can find all of those exclusive interviews on our TMG YouTube page. Make sure to follow along. But in today's episode, we're going to go with our top takeaways from the hospitality show in Denver. And it really started right off the bat. I mean, this was a end to end, just jam-packed insights, trends, everything a hotelier could want. This was billed as one of the most comprehensive shows in hospitality. And from all of the education sessions that we saw, the panelists, the conversations that we had, the networking that went on, again, hats off to the teams over at AHLA and QuestX. Where I'll start my key takeaways is really one of the first quotes that really resonated with me as an attendee on the first day. And this was, I forget who I can attribute this quote to, but was talking about how we ended the 2024 hospitality show in San Antonio and everything that has happened between then and the start of the 2025 hospitality show. An election, a tumultuous start to the year with tariffs, international travel, almost seeing double-digit drops in some places between some countries. And then now we have a government shutdown here. So many things that the hospitality industry had to deal with. And I have the privilege of attending multiple events throughout the year, and never have I ever been on such a roller coaster ride. It started at the beginning of the year in March, where we met a lot of hoteliers that were kind of bracing for impact. They were coming down this hill. Projections didn't look great. A lot of sentiment out there was not awesome. Deals were not getting done. It just feel very like a crawl. And then all of a sudden summer came. And as we were kind of bracing ourselves for this just dip, or this terrible kind of cliff that we were about to fall off, we kind of opened our eyes as an industry and said, it's really not as bad as it's being made out to be. And a lot of hoteliers, as we saw and we interviewed, talked to, had some really good summers, had some really good numbers, occupancy, looking across different markets. Some of the markets that weren't doing as well rebounded. And they were starting to see a little bit of glimmer of hope. And now here we are at the end of the year, and it feels like those storm clouds are brewing again. And we're bracing ourselves for a new year in 2026. And maybe it's because we're just looking at the numbers. It's budget season. We're starting to try to forecast like we love to do and have to do, frankly, in hospitality. But it just feels like that worriness is coming over us again. But to that, I feel like it's in these times where there's a lot of creativity and ingenuity that starts to really spur. And it's these events that could be a catalyst for real change in our industry. There were a lot of industry leaders up on stage over these last few days at the hospitality show in Denver that presented some pretty interesting ideas when it came to housekeeping, staffing, the booking experience, and really challenging the status quo. And it's these types of events that can really start a conversation and build a foundation and momentum for true change within our industry. We saw that change happen very, very quickly during COVID because it needed to. It was a necessity. But now here we are, and we can all feel it. We can feel the belts tightening from the hotel all the way to our guests and consumers. And this is when we need to start looking around and trying to come up some fresh ideas. And, some of those might not even be within hospitality. I mean, one of the keynote speakers was Chris Barton from Shazam. And, trying to get these fresh voices, maybe outside of hospitality. Blue Origin was another speaker talking about space tourism, maybe looking for some new channels. Space tourism might not be a couple years down the line in your portfolio if you're a management company right now, but is it a trend that you can capitalize on, right? Are there areas where this could be happening within the next decade? You're positioning yourself in markets that are going to cater to that demand, which could exponentially increase. It was truly amazing to hear some of the stories that we heard at the hospitality show when it came to space tourism. But all that to say, it doesn't necessarily need to be hospitality led for this hospitality innovation to come from. And I feel like it's during these times, during these events, where you're going to see that. We had several different conversations, one with a leader of Landing Place Hotels, the brand leader of Landing Place Hotels, who saw an opportunity to do things a little differently with a brand. And they're seeing double-digit, they've already accumulated a double-digit pipeline right now in development. It's very, very interesting. We're at a kind of an inflection point in hospitality right now as we enter 2026 and into this kind of unknown. But it will be really, really exciting to see what type of innovation comes from this, because I do think this is when people are going to start getting creative, because those margins are just too tight right now, right? Between staffing, construction costs, the demand is still there, but the profits are not being seen. And there was no, it was not an error that the hospitality show started its programming with multiple sessions on profits and how these management companies, brands can work together, and these owners' assets can work together in order to see profit margin increase, because right now it's just slimmed over these last couple of years. And it's being felt. It's being felt throughout the industry. It was interesting to see some of the leaders that I spoke to and got the opportunity to interview, talk about capitalizing on some of these trends that we're seeing right now in hospitality. Personalization, multi-generational travel, experiential travel, right? Marriott announced recently its outdoor collection, and lifestyle brands, all of this mixed in. And I think what's happening right now is the traveler, the consumer, is feeling that tightening in their belt, but they still want to travel. It has not been taken away from them like it was in 2020, but they certainly have to do some more due diligence. And when they do travel, which they're going to prioritize, they want to make sure they make the biggest bang for their buck. So they're going to start prioritizing and maybe looking for those hotels that they feel can give them the widest and breadth of experience, right? Rather than just be loyalty to those brands. So those brands are seeing that. They're trying to capitalize on these trends, and they're exploring more into the soft brand lifestyle division. We had heads of a couple different management companies talk about, the patterns that they're seeing in consumer sentiment and what they want out of their experience. They want to feel like they're having a localized experience. We've always talked about that on this podcast, about how to try to tell your story, how to make your guest part of the story, part of your local community, how to give them that community first experience. But now guests are clamoring for it. They're looking for it. They're doing research. They're doing research in different places. That was another big trend and takeaway that I heard a lot is hotels, management companies, they're starting to look at how guests are using the booking journey right now. And where does LLMs fit into that, right? Uh, they feel like they don't want to be get left behind in a search, just like I'm sure when Google started to aggregate all these hotels online, they didn't want to be on page 2 or page 3, right? So how can, when a traveler searches best hotels in this market, or maybe a little bit more specific of a search, your hotel be retrieved in those? How can your hotel be a part um, of those results, right? And I think more and more hoteliers are asking that question. It'll be really interesting to see where that goes. AI and technology, it feels like it has to be a part of every programming agenda and conversation that we talked about now, but it is starting, I feel like, to settle into two separate camps. One that really want to prioritize the employee empowerment, right? How can I use AI and technology to empower my employees to do their job efficiently, right? Something that we've preached at Travel Media Group, where we have several AI innovations that help the employee get some really deeper insights into its online reputation. But also, there's that second camp of, well, we're going to try to go guest experience first. What can I do with AI and technology in order to make a big difference on the guest experience? And I think those two camps actually go hand in hand, to be honest with you. If you empower your employees to improve the guest experience, one is going to happen towards the other. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship there. But it is interesting to see, because you talk about AI and technology. I think the one thing that everyone can agree on hospitality is you don't want to be left behind, right? And there was an interesting keynote that was at the hospitality show, a futurist that was talking about hospitality and how you have to, you don't want to be the first one into the bear cave of technology. You'd rather be the second person exploring the bear cave. And while I do agree with that, I do think it is going to be those innovators that jump into kind of the deep end and try to integrate this stuff. I think guests right now and consumers are at a place where they're still willing to accept a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to AI and technology, than they will be in, let's say, 6 months to a year. So it might be that first brand that goes all in, that might be known as a trendsetter, rather than saying, well, this was rolled out prematurely. So it will be interesting to see more and more brands obviously rolling different things out. But I think, they're trying to go about this really systematically in hospitality, as we know, a little bit late to the game with adopting some of this technology. I mean, you get to some of the hotels, and some of the technology is still very, very outdated. So you talk about rolling that up, across a brand or a portfolio of hotels, could take some time. So we'll see how that plays out. A couple great conversations. This is always a great show to look at the relationship between brands, management companies, and owners, especially at a time, like I said, where profits are so tight, margins are so thin. Who can bend a little bit more, and what goodwill is that going to potentially serve in the long run here? I think there's a jockeying for position between the brands right now. We've seen management companies, sprout overnight, and some really, really successful management companies start to make some strategic partnerships, and start to get into areas, that are trend setting. I think about hotel equities and the postcard cabins portfolio and play. I think it's very interesting to see, and we'll continue to see that, because right now we're at a place that just feels we're getting a little stuck in our industry, and we got to figure out a way to kind of wiggle through it. And that's where that creativity and ingenuity that I was talking about comes into play. And then finally, my last takeaway from the incredible couple days that we had out in Denver was, first of all, what an amazing city, Denver, Colorado. And I love the fact that they had the mayor of Denver at the show, was a part of the ribbon cutting ceremony. Rosanna Mayetta from AHLA did a great interview with the mayor of Denver and talking about how the city had teamed up with hospitality. And it was really inspiring. And it was really cool to see Denver. They talked about the importance of sports tourism. We were there during a Denver Broncos Dallas Cowboys game. You could see that sports tourism dollar being spent all over the restaurants, hotels. So it is interesting in markets that might be a little bit more challenged right now. We saw this last year with San Francisco. This year, Las Vegas. Can some of these city stakeholders come together with hospitality management companies, associations, professionals, and do some things to, again, kind of get us unstuck in some of these markets that have been struggling? There's other markets right now, that are doing a fantastic job. And we spoke to, some of the portfolio leaders that have assets in those markets, and it was extremely compelling. Definitely suggest, if you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube page. You can see all the exclusive content. We had 8 incredible interviews with professionals, hospitality professionals, like I said, heads of associations, brand leaders, and C-suite executives from multiple management companies. And it was just such a privilege and an honor to be able to kind of talk hospitality with them. So, again, Denver was incredible. Very excited about Miami next year. And if you didn't get the opportunity, go check out my interview with Alexi Kajavi at QuestX, who did, I think, one of the best ways. We always have our hospitality show preview with Alexi. I think in the interview we had out in Denver was probably the best way to really hype up what Miami 2026 is going to be about. In a event that is so comprehensive, the independent hotel space is really bubbling up right now. Brands want to be independents. Independents want to act more like brands. There's this inflection point that we're headed towards, this fork in the road that we're headed towards, and it's all going to culminate next year in Miami, an independent hotel capital of the world. We are very familiar, as you know, we head down there on an annual basis. I'm so excited that it's right here in our backyard. We're going to take the Bright Line down. We're going to be bringing you so much coverage, exclusive interviews, and we're going to get a little bit more exclusive coverage, and we're going to be doing a lot of stuff leading up to the show to prepare you for it. So I hope you will stay with me, subscribe, follow, but to put a final bow on 2025 Hospitality Show, incredible show. Thank you again to AHLA and QuestX for making this possible. Can't wait to see what you have in store for us in Miami 2026. Thank you for listening to The Sweet Spot, and we will talk to you next time.